Um, I am very pleased to introduce our speakers for today's meeting. Sarah Esmond leads the Wisconsin All of Us Community Engagement Team and is also the Administrative Director of the Collaborative Center for Health Equity. Um, April Kagaya, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name, is the community engagement team for the Wisconsin All of Us project. She also leads the All of Us at Wisconsin Madison Community Advisory Board. So I'm gonna hand it over to them because I think they'll um, be describing a little bit more what these projects are and their engagement work related to it. Let me just get the share screen going. And okay.
Thank you, Nicole. I know it's hard to both hostess and do the technology. So just you focus on your dashboard and April and I'll step in here. We're delighted to be here today. Thank you everybody for the time. We were tapped because I think Nicole and Tim came across the All of Us Wisconsin website that UW hosts and saw something reflected there that indicated to them, hey, maybe this group has something to teach us about engagement work. And I'm delighted to have my colleague April join me for this presentation. We thought we would talk through a little bit of, do a brief introduction and sort of talk through our work, but really impressed with what we're already hearing and seeing by some of your colleagues, some of those lightning round presentations. I profess I don't know what Tim is counting, but I hope, April, that we will, meet the challenge of the competition. Next slide, please. So we're mindful of time and going to try to stay within your boundaries. We'll do some brief introductions, also including a brief introduction of all of us. If you have interest in learning more about the program, Nicole shared the website link and also the one to the center that I'm a part of. We believe storytelling is a great opportunity for exchange. So we're going to share a case example in an effort to illustrate some of what we're talking about with the engagement that we take, the engagement approaches that we take, creating opportunities for action because we're essentially asking the public for their help with all of us. And then we have some time set aside, I think, after that for some discussion and exchange. So April and I will be switching back and forth, and I'm going to take the next slide. This is April in one of her many looks. She is a California native and has been in Wisconsin for over 30 years. I think she brings some of that sunshine from California to her work. She's a mom of four, as she said, and a community activist. Has been with the School of Medicine and Public Health now for, I think she's just coming up on closing out her second year as an AOU outreach specialist. And she's going to take the perch today, really emphasizing the creation of equitable spaces locally and the work that she does. We decided to introduce each other kind of late in the game. And I said, I want her to also be recognized for being super humble and very funny. You're welcome, April. I just did the first audible there. Next slide's for April.
Thank you, Sarah. And this is Sarah Esmond. She's a native of Evanston, Illinois, and has lived in Dane County between Madison and Stoughton for the past approximately 30 years. She's a middle child of 10, which brings her to have the skills of a mediator, diplomat, and active listener in that role. And within UW, she has many hats. She works in areas of the School of Nursing, School of Medicine and Public Health, the Collaborative Center for Health Equity since 2002. And then Sarah's perch is navigating health equity at and with UW. Next slide, please. So All of Us Research Program is a health data program. It's launched nationwide through the National Institute for Health, and Wisconsin is one of the sites that is housing this research program. The goal is to accelerate research and to improve health that is done through precision medicine, through individualized prevention and treatment, with considerations for lifestyle, socioeconomic status, environment, and biology. And we do this by recruiting folks from various walks of life, including rural, folks over the age of 65, and folks from different ethnic backgrounds as well. Next slide, please. And like I said, Wisconsin is one of the sites or consortium, and under that, we have the UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee sites. There's also the Gunderson Health System out of La Crosse, Marshfield Clinic in Marshfield, and then the Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Next slide, please. I'll pass it to Sarah.
So April is just one of my colleagues on the community engagement team. We have a team just as your program reflects. Tyson Jackson is another local native of Madison, a former collegiate athlete, a father, someone who's done a lot of community development and community organizing. Samantha Bath is our newest teammate and has demonstrated, I think, to April and our colleagues about how somebody who understands the mission of the work and has a great orientation to service can land in Madison and make contributions pretty quickly. She comes to us via South Africa and after doing some global work in service roles in both Korea and Indiana, North Korea and Indiana. And then Katia Jimenez is our colleague who resides in Mount Horeb. She is a small business owner and also I think loves to reflect the rural, the outside of Madison perspective, at least one of them on our team. And she also came to us with a great background from the CDC, lending to another national program where she had to kind of land in communities and generate some interest around research and then disappear for a while. So a large study called NHANES. Next slide, please. April, I can't remember if I'm setting this up for you or you're gonna go.
Yeah, I think you're gonna set it up for me.
Okay, so April and I were like, okay, we have 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We wanna tell you a story about just a particular agency here locally that we are working with in a variety of different ways, and just sharing a little bit from each of our perspectives, kind of what's gone into creating a partnership with this clinic, this community clinic, and in a way of just kind of illustrating and emphasizing some of the important features we feel are part of any partnership, new, building from brand new or maybe building from a place where there's at least a little bit of connectivity. So April's going to lead us off and then I'm going to do some commentary from sort of the perspective of I came into the project a little after the early stages and kind of what I brought from my perch.
Thanks, Sarah. So Access is one of our partners. We, prior to COVID, were sitting at the Access Community Health Center located off of Park Street. And one of the things that we're really cognizant of is creating relationships. And Hugh, your presentation with the key to family engagement was really resonated, because that's similar to some of the things that we look for in creating partnerships and just building those relationships. And so we like to meet people where they're at. Even though we are recruiting for a research program, we also too care about the individuals that we're interacting with. We're not here to try to sell them anything. We're here mainly to provide them education. So what we would do is we would go to the Access site. There was a table kind of off to the side where we would sit. We had our AOU kind of tablecloth and swag and just sitting there and really just waiting for people to come and approach us. We're not, out there like trying to, after people come out of their appointments, like handing them flyers and trying to push information down their throat. Just more of a kind of laid back approach. And through that, we found that there are people that would approach us, at the table to either get hand sanitizer or a stress ball or, whatever thing that they might have found attractive to them. And then we would gently, give them a little bit of background about AOU. There were some people that we interacted with that weren't interested, which is fine. But then we would see them regularly. They would come back, the following month for another appointment. And then we'd be like, oh, you guys are still here. Actually, can you tell me a little bit more information? Or, now I'm ready to sign up. So it was just one of those things that we were just able to build those relationships. And the neat thing about being at that site in particular was right across the parking lot is the Urban League. And there we had research coordinators who would be ready to actually enroll and take their, what we call PMB, their their blood, their body measurements if they're interested in enrolling. So we could walk them right across the parking lot and help them kind of facilitate their enrollment in the program. But like I said, it's mainly relationship building, building those connections with people in the community, meeting them where they're at by going to where people, come on a regular basis. And that's kind of the foundation for how we like to just engage. And I think we build very authentic and fruitful relationships that way. And it's been very successful.
Thank you, April. I'm gonna, before I get into this slide, before we use this slide, Nicole, I'm just gonna speak a little bit more about the case. Thank you. There's a few things that I think I saw a comment in the chat too. So April, if I'm remembering correctly, I think even before you guys managed to set up the ability to sit in the clinic atrium, did you also do a lunch and learn there at that clinic as sort of yeah, go ahead.
So we did that actually after we were already in the space.
Okay.
Lunch and learn, it was kind of, I don't want to say backwards because I don't feel like there's really a right or a wrong way necessarily to engage, but we spoke to doctors and nurses who work for Access just to give them more information about all of us so that they could then, if someone were to go into their appointment and say like, what's with those people sitting out there? What is that really about? That they would be able to have that information. And so, yeah, we presented to them, we provided them lunch, gave them a little bit more in depth about All of Us research program, what goes into what we actually do when we collect the information, what it means to be a participant in it. And then that relationship was able to help strengthen relationship between the doctors and the patients too in regards to All of Us. So yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention that piece.
No worries at all. And I'm with you. I think the beauty of this experience was kind of following the lead of the Access team members. And I will just add, as a person who certainly recognizes Access's role in the community and the fact that they are a safety net site and very tapped, there's a few things I just want to point out from the administrative side of what April's describing. So we are very fortunate to be in a project that has dollars assigned to community engagement and the ability to have staff who that is their full-time role, and the way they carry out their work can look very different depending on the day and what they're involved in. But just a few things that I think aren't necessarily common to all projects is having that kind of budget, and also certainly not to research projects where sometimes there is a, well, not to say that we're not under pressure to accrue the public into this project, because certainly there is a great deal of pressure to introduce the project and see if people will engage. But the fact that our team members needed to be in that space in a consistent way and starting to create some of that visual presence. And then, and I can't remember exactly how the negotiation of tabling went about, probably because one of our colleagues had an in there, but then that advanced to getting in front of the staff, right, for a little more explanation that expanded from sort of that one-on-one transaction to more of a clinic team listening to the conversation. And April, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was even, mixed views in that room, right? Like we're a busy, we're a busy clinic, and we're trying to move patients and families through this, work that we're doing and what they're here for, and they have urgency. And so, some bean counters in accounting might look at the commitment of staff time just being in a space as, that's a bit of a risk. And could they be multitasking? And could they be doing other things on their laptops? And we're going, yeah, nope. We really want them to be able to sit in a, not be stressed and really try to connect with folks in a natural way as part of the routine of the setting. And so, this is something that took a while to build. And just as April said, we were very strategic in thinking about, the clinic was very clear, we're not going to be able to host you to do the full processing of a member of the public who elects to participate. How can we work together to figure out a way to make that possible and not add burden to any client being seen, make it as easy as possible. And so, you know, this was a challenge, I think, for the teams to simultaneously approach urban triage and think about, or excuse me, not urban triage, urban league next door, and think about what might be possible. Well, first of all, hey, here's us. So April, would you mind talking a little bit about that? Because I think it wasn't an obvious, it wasn't a, actually, you know, we didn't know if it would be possible to do.
Yeah, for the Urban Lake Partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that partnership was already in place prior to my arrival on the team.
Okay.
Just what I've seen and just interacting with the staff, and just like they were very open to it once they heard what all of us was. Like, yeah, sure, come on in. Like, you know, no problem. We were able to use their space. They had a lot of space that was available. So we were able to use, I think it was 3 times a week. There was one office space in their downstairs area where one of our research coordinators was able to sit, and people could schedule appointments at that site. We also held pop-up events there. So we just did like a mass mailing through MyChart and through postcards to people in that zip code to invite them to come hear about all of us. So we provided breakfast, juice, coffee, that sort of thing, and just kind of like an open space. People could come hear about it, and then if they wanted to enroll, then they could. And that has, I think we did it there twice pre-COVID, and that was very successful in us being able to get people to enroll. And the nice thing about, like I said, our relationship building is that when we're there doing pop-up events, our staff, we're there engaging with the people, and we'll sit with them. Let's say there's someone who's not computer literate. We'll sit there and we'll just ask them the questions and then fill it out for them. So it's not like here's this, you know, tablet, fill it out, let us know if you have any questions. We literally walk them through step by step if they need it. And so that's another way that we just build relationships and then build trust within the community. And I think that's very important as well.
I completely agree. And again, I think the presence, the repeat presence, the consistency, these are folks that they're getting to know as part of being kind of associated with the project. The reason that a certain space requirement is necessary is because the process, the actual enrollment process includes, as April is saying, a not insignificant amount of going through a consent process, and then an entire sort of related step where we're collecting biospecimens and biomarkers. So, you know, this is a lot to ask of an individual. There is an incentive, it's a one-time incentive, but it's a big ask. And it's an ask of a particular, you know, you're trying to access community members who aren't well represented in research. And the whole idea is that that is driving some of the health disparities that we're surrounded by. So a lot of logistical matters that we have to account for when we're setting up these partnerships, thinking about space. You got to really think ahead of like, how's this all going to interact? So our neighbors in this case have been wonderful. I think the other thing I'll add is that it then became possible with access once COVID hit and we were no longer able to do much of what we had been doing face-to-face. They were interested in, they understood our desire to kind of maintain some momentum. So just as one example, we made arrangements to present to their patient councils, and they have a English language patient council and a Spanish language patient council. That tip or that help came through our CAB. Members on our CAB were instrumental in assisting with a bit of that. Is there more, April, that you would like to share with regards to that piece or the CAB interaction?
No, I mean, so our CAB, our Community Advisory Board, is made up of 8 community members, various different backgrounds. There are some that work in healthcare, there are some that are retired, there are some that work fire patches, a variety of different organizations, and their charge is to educate the community in their areas on all of us. And one of the benefits to having people like this is that they're able to then bring things to our attention and bring connections that maybe we otherwise wouldn't have. And so that's just one example of how that happened.
Thank you so much. And following that, we had an opportunity, one of our team members was invited to present to the executive board where we could showcase a little bit about the work that was happening at this single clinic to see if there might be interest in replicating it at other clinics. And you know, Access has just been incredibly generous in kind of making time for us and to sort of be creative in ways that we could maintain a bit of presence. So we also are able to advertise in their newsletter, not advertise, we're able to sort of put stories in their newsletter, very accessible stories, I guess intended to sort of keep, you know, keep the brand on the radar while we navigated through COVID. And we're in conversations with them again about sort of what might be possible opening up hopefully opening up post-COVID in this calendar year. The other thing I will add is that because I'm connected to the project, but also wear a hat on campus with the Collaborative Center for Health Equity, there's pieces of this that I can learn from the All of Us team and their experiences, and being an active listener, kind of hearing what Access is talking about with regards to some of their limitations or some of their aspirations, and take that over to the UW side to activate on things that the project isn't necessarily positioned or in some cases even allowed to advance, and bring that over into another setting to see if there's a way to address it you know, separately, but in a complementary way. So in this case, we learned that Access had as many are dealing with, had employees who had some vaccine uptake concerns. And so there was means for us in the Collaborative Center for Health Equity to offer to assist with a bit of technical assistance around surveying staff and doing a bit of qualitative field work to lend to that interest they had in kind of understanding really quickly kind of what was going on and needing a little extra bandwidth. So that was a give that we could make without kind of a give without a get, I say. The other thing is that the All of Us program relies on clinic partners who have patients with EHR records. We haven't talked about that much today, but it's a part of the data, the health data that All of Us is interested in accessing. And an FQHC like Access really doesn't necessarily have what's needed for that kind of EHR transaction work. They haven't been asked to engage in that way before. So through the All of Us Wisconsin project, they were well positioned to go after some HRSA dollars that became available to help shore up that infrastructure in FQHCs statewide. And I believe 2, maybe 3 of our FQHCs in Wisconsin were able to access those dollars. So something's being left behind too, something that's built into their infrastructure that allows them to do different things, learn some different things from their records, but also allows them to participate in something they may not have been able to easily otherwise. So we're big on leaving something behind, thinking about not just what we're getting, but what we're giving. So we wanted to use this story today as a way of just sharing a little bit from our different perches, how we think about the work and how we support the work. And I'm looking at the time and thinking, April, maybe we'll just flash the next slide as sort of our wrap-up slide. I think these are things we heard from some of your presenters earlier in the day too. We feel strongly that, you know, true partnerships are going to rest on these characteristics. My job is to help this team get the information that they need quickly, keep them updated. They know they can count on me for access to resources either within the project or perhaps extending and reaching outside of the project. We both have to be ready to present the AOU project across very diverse settings. So in the instance of the board of the executive board, they wanted a frontline staff person to be presenting on this project. They weren't looking for our faculty principal investigators. They wanted to hear sort of from the ground how things were going, which was totally awesome. And I think the trustworthy piece comes from some of these things we've kind of hammered today: being present, being nimble, being respectful, being genuine, things we heard you guys talking about too in your work. You just can't serve unless you can really hear and understand and appreciate where people are coming from, whether that's in the place that they're in, but also just where they are in their world, navigating their world. We have a lot of diversity in our staff that isn't just about racial ethnic heritage, but about their leadership and time here in Madison and their connectedness. So these are professionals with really extensive portfolios, networks of connections that we rely on and have to honor and respect that we need to leave a good feeling there too, because they're risking opening those opportunities up to us. Before we go to the next slide, I want to just ask April, anything you want to mention at this point? Our last slide is a little bit set up for interaction with the audience.
Good.
See, she's so humble. Okay, Nicole, you could put up the last slide then. We just, we thought because there's some time set aside for exchange, these were questions we just put up for maybe things we could talk around during this time. We're happy to answer questions or go into more details about what we shared with you, but your event coordinators, Nicole and others, were so wonderful in giving us a lot of information, a lot of details about kind of where you are and what this family engagement challenge and this goal is and where you want to be. And these were just some questions we came up with that we might talk around in terms of just getting to a place of being in an action oriented, taking steps of action, moving out of processing. And, I'm being in academia as long as I have, oftentimes rooms, the first thing they do, well, we need to do a needs assessment. Well, I think we've captured that pretty well. We've really got specialized data, but we think about what we could do with that, how to apply it. So anyway, these were points that we came up with, and we would just open up the floor to hear from you about what we've shared and if it's been helpful in terms of what you're thinking about moving forward with family engagement. So thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you both. Really appreciate it. And I thank you so much for bringing these questions. And this is our, instead of small groups, we're doing a large group discussion and exchange here. So I invite everyone who is interested in turning their video on, you can do that, and we can feel like we're a little bit of a group again today. And I'll try hard not to be the first person to jump in because I got lots of thoughts, but that's always true.
Yeah, I think Nicole also asked us if we would lend to facilitation. So I'll just, maybe the first bullet. I think this was a term referenced in some of the information we got, hard to reach. And it's a common one I hear also on campus at times. And I really encourage my colleagues to kind of unbundle that. Who do we mean? Who are we referring to? What are we referring to? I was thinking a little bit about what I think Hugh was presenting of how easy it is to kind of find fault or project your own, what's important or what's your values. So that's a common term that's really gone out of favor in a lot of spaces. And I just mean to point it out because I think so has under-resourced, underserved. I think a lot of our customers, our clients, our neighbors are taking the position that we can define ourselves if you're interested in understanding who we are. So I put that up there to be a little provocative and get a little exchange going, but welcome to hear from others.
Yeah, and a provocative is good. And a lot of the phrases we end up with they're in the funding opportunities from HRSA. So you're like, okay, yes. That's
worst offenders. Worst offenders of all, federal sponsors.
Around these like, oh, yeah.
So Sarah, this is Tim. I'm wondering, do you find yourself then having to use different language as you're writing reports and as you're interacting with colleagues and then trying to distance from that wording when you go out in the community because you really don't know what the community would prefer? So how do you work with, you have an internal set, but yet that's not really what you want to say when you get out there? How do you balance that?
The short answer is yes, there's a lot of translation, and not just for these terms, these descriptors, but also, and April, I'm sure can weigh in on this too, just in this example, the NIH language. So NIH and the way they understand community engagement, I'm speaking in a broad brush. There are examples of different levels of understanding about this, but generally speaking, for the group that's behind the All of Us project, they're a bit late to what community engagement actually is and what it requires. The best thing about this award that I saw right away in 2015, 2016, when we went after it, was there's some dollars put aside. That's the first time I'd really seen something significant and an investment of community engagement. So somebody along the line got that right. But yes, Tim, the short answer is I'm doing a lot of translation and pivoting in English, moving between community settings where there are very context specific ways of referring to the community that's being served as well as the work being done, and an academic setting where there's an entire other dictionary, if you will, data dictionary,
Mhm.
especially in research worlds. So, hard to reach. I still hear a lot, for example, in my clinical trials colleagues, that's not uncommon, and it's actually in print way too often. So,
So Sarah, when you're reaching out and recruiting for community members to join you, and you're going for specific, you're going for that underreached population, you know who you don't have, you know who you are not reaching. How do you ask for those people to come forward as you're trying to join them in their space? How do you make them know that you want them without using a term that is in itself problematic?
Oh, if I can answer.
Please,
please.
April.
So I think that's why for us it's very important that we have people that are representative of those communities or areas, right? Because if I'll use myself for example, as an African American woman, if I were to go into the Urban League or other spaces, and with my connections in Madison, 9 times out of 10, I know people in that space. So I already have a reputation, so it's trustworthy. So they're more likely to listen to what I have to say. There is, though, in research, a lot of hesitation in the African American community in regards to research, just because of historical things like Henrietta Lacks and Tuskegee. But me being able to talk to them about, I also had those hesitations, and here's why I'm supportive of all of us, and this is what my experience has been, is very helpful. So, and again, it goes to that relationship building. Not to say that you have to have somebody that looks like them, but it definitely helps, right? Because it's a trust building thing from the start. But that being said, it doesn't also mean that they, just because I look like them, they're going to, trust what I'm saying. But it just helps to have that authentic engagement with people. So wherever we can, it's best to be able to have people that either look like them or are familiar in those spaces and have worked with them and maybe there's a certain organization that somebody on our team has worked with, so they're already familiar with a director or someone at the food pantry. So that kind of helps us get in the door, so to speak. But it just really helps with the intentionality of just being authentic and that group knowing that, okay, they're coming because they really care, not just because I'm a number that they're going to be able to say we got, whatever percentage of, this underrepresented population.
So I will just add on, thank you so much, April. I think that is the ideal scenario, is that you have a colleague who is well experienced with the priorities and the mission of a particular organization and can help kind of bridge that whatever's driving the ask to figure out how to make the approach, or if to make the approach. I mean, we've had plenty of conversations on our team of like, hey, on paper, this looks like a great match. And then appreciating like, they just got a new a new executive director last month, or a key person just left. Let's table that or think carefully about scaling our ask to something that might be more easily, something we can approach with. I think, you know, good practice, my training is as a consumer scientist, so good practice on trying to reach any segment that you're interested in reaching is to do that legwork ahead of time. Where am I walking in? What are their strategic objectives? Is there a potential match between something that's tied to the priorities of this project and something that they're doing? It's even better if I have an April or a Tyson or a Katya or a Samantha who's got the personal connection and some history, because I don't want to ever jeopardize April's reputation. She's not going to let me. She's going to let me stumble across my own self if she needs to, and I trust her to let me do that if it's what's got to happen. But the idea is to try to not bring something that's such a burden or so far from what's happening in that space.
Sarah and April, another thing that I heard in your example that I feel has a really powerful, broader message for a lot of the work we do, is that, you know, you were in the community and you were waiting for people to come to you. You were available, but you were not pushing. Now, obviously you're doing research recruitment, and that's different than a lot of, you know, service provision or helping that people are doing. But I think personally, I feel like one of the most profound and insidious mistakes we make that's disempowering to other people is when we're trying to help is it's sort of a push out model. You know, like we know what issue we want to help with.
Unidirectional.
Exactly right. We figured out exactly what's going to help. Here it is. We would offer it. And I've profoundly made this mistake a few years ago, feeling like, you know, who are the people who are not accessing this help? I want to make sure they have a chance to access it, and then trying to, you know, connect with them. But, you know, where in that, so there's a parallel in what you're saying to kind of being there and being available and just showing up and being available and showing up and being available and communicating what it is you have to offer and not shoving it down anybody's throat. But then I think, and more than that for us, I feel like there's a step many of our programs and efforts need to take now that doesn't just, that goes out into the community and forms relationships with people to say, all right, here's a problem I care about solving. You know, that when you could have a young child who has a developmental challenge that shows up, and then you might want some help or some services and supports, and you're not going to know where they are. And so I like to help with that issue. That's where I'm passionate. And then talking to people in relationship to say, how do you experience that challenge in your community? How do you frame it? How do you, you know, view it? How is it different than how I view it? What would you want in that situation? What would be helpful to you? And then being much more active and bringing to the community what they want and need, co-creating with people what could be helpful to them, instead of, you know, saying, here's what I have to offer, and my goal is for you to take it from me. So that's where my head is at the moment. Not to say I have any skill at all necessarily in doing that. It's just profoundly obvious to me that that's kind of where my head is.
And to your point, like there's a lot of parallels in that, is that the people have to be ready to receive the help that you're providing, right? So whether it's someone who, if you know you're trying to get somebody to quit smoking, if they don't want to, it doesn't matter what program you have. Similarly to your programs with how you're trying to support parents, if maybe they haven't accepted or fully come to terms with what their child or children are going through, so they're not going to be ready to receive the help. So that's where that relationship building comes in, because maybe talk about something else. Because there have been people where I've been sitting at Access and people come up to the table and like they have, you know, they comment on something I'm wearing, or we talk about the weather, and you're building relationships in regards to other things. But then that foundation is set. And then when they come back and see me again, they're like, okay, now tell me more about that. So it's
that girl with those cute shoes.
Right.
She's back again.
You have to be willing to sometimes put aside exactly what your product or service is and just engage on a personal level separate from that to be able to build that trust, and then they will circle back.
I'll just add, thank you, April. I couldn't agree more. I think also we're often late to accept that they may be making a choice, that they don't want to engage. And it could be because they don't have the information, absolutely. But I think until you know that for certain, it's important to keep open that option that they may not want to engage either right now, or there's a history, something's occurred where there's some distrust that needs some repairing. So, we're sitting in a clinic that's, doing its damnedest to serve its clients. They have to trust that this isn't a mission creep away from what they're doing. And April's exactly right. The things that and the other thing I would add is that if you're going to expend that time, you need to be supported to do it. It can't be a half-time effort. Like the model needs to work to allow that kind of presence and continuity. And also, do you have the ability to confidently say, I'm not sure I can help with that thing that you're telling me about, but I might have a place to go to see if there'd be another avenue. And I think that's the other piece that the Collaborative Center for Health Equity is trying to provide the All of Us project, is a way of seeing other opportunities for connection with the university and some of the resources that it has. This is a partner to the university and to UW Health also. So I think important to appreciate those other elements that might be at play.
We can take a few more minutes if there are other comments or questions, just so you know, we can adjust the schedule there.
So while people are thinking, and I bet you April can do this for me, because she's really quick on social media. We just did a project on community influencers around COVID, and there was a nice presentation, an array of presentations by community influencers, and the work that goes into some of what you guys showed at the front end of this time together today, to creating pathways and communication pathways. So I just would love to, April, if you don't have it handy, I'm mixing it up. It's not AOU, it was a Zichi production. I'll get that to you guys because it might be useful to hear some of the experiences of individuals who've been tapped to kind of be in these community liaison roles, but then are also learning how to influence through social media channels, messaging about, in this case, it was COVID related, but I think it's a great series of insights about what that requires.
That's
in
great.
terms of continuity, presence, and those things. So it might be helpful.
That's fabulous. No, we've had discussions recently about community influencers and community liaisons. So I've been hearing much more about that. Be great to have.
Sure.
Anne, did you have a question?
Well, I do, but it's hard to formulate, and I don't think we have time to fully explore it. Sorry, my camera does this when it activates. But my question has to do with something that, for purposes of brevity, I'll use the public health term that I'm still struggling with, or have pretty much abandoned, of target population. So the issue is that if you are trying to reach a group, and I'll use the word reach here, and that is has a particular, you're trying to find common interest with a focus, and not just the entire community. So it's not, you're not looking for, let's just engage with this entire community. There may be a group within the community that you're particularly interested in engaging with. Sort of how obviously you want to either start with people that you know within that group, or, but I'm just thinking if you're, how to sort of let people know you're concerned about the entire community, but your particular interest is in a focused area without sounding sort of excluding or uncaring about the rest of the community. So again, I don't think we have time to really explore this fully, but I'm just struggling with this idea of sort of the focus of our work, because we can't solve all the problems, and most of us are funded to look at a particular aspect.
Hey, Anne, what you're grappling with is exactly what needs grappling. What's the driver behind my desire to reach a particular segment? And if you're struggling with putting into words what that driver is, imagine how it sounds on the other side of like, why are you in front of me again? Why was I invited to this space? So it is tricky to appreciate, and I think to own and acknowledge sometimes the funders of projects are very interested in seeing a diverse array of people participating. That's a very common driver for research. And the reason why and why AOU is so important and was actually the first clinical research project I ever enrolled in was because most of our research findings are based on pools of people that aren't diverse, which leaves out the benefit of those very things, those technologies, those discoveries, that medication, whatever it is. So, you know, really grappling with, is the interest to meet a metric? It's probably more than that, I'm guessing. Is the interest to understand a segment of the population and their understanding of us as a project, as a service deliverer? You know, do we know? So it's getting very strategic around why what's motivating and what's driving. And it can just be a desire to help, but help about what? What indicates that this segment of the population needs your help, needs the program's help? April, do you have more to add to that or thoughts on that?
I think you said it very well.
So I'm going to just go a little further down that path, right?
Push in,
So
push in.
yeah, right. So in children and youth with special health care needs, we have programs to support families that have kiddos with disabilities. And we get feedback from all sorts of different evaluations. And what we hear consistently is that it's very helpful. And oh my God, I wish I'd met up with you guys years ago. And
Known sooner,
yeah,
right?
That's the main comment. And then we look at our demographics and we're not serving Black families very well at all. When you look at the population of Black and African-American families in the state, and you know that 20% of kiddos have special health care needs, you got to figure it's, you know, that doesn't stop at the line of race, but we don't have those, you know, when we ask for them demographic information in the phone calls, we recognize that we're not, so to speak, reaching that community. We think what we have based on the feedback we've been given is something families like and families want and families wanted years ago. And we feel terrible that it appears as though we're not providing that service to minority families. So then, you know, is it that they don't want what we have to offer? How would we even know that? Because we haven't even offered. I mean, we just, you know, and I keep saying our biggest problem is that we predominantly respond to somebody reaching out to us. All right. So you call us and we'll help you. If you don't know we exist, if you don't know, you know, you're not going to call. And then we say, oh, well, so sorry. But that's not acceptable either. So it's not just that, like,
Yep.
It's not just us having big heads and thinking that, you know, we have something that's going to benefit you. We hear from families that what we have will benefit, you know, yeah, absolutely. We're not reaching Native families either. So anyways, that, I guess it's more complicated. Yeah.
It is, but we can't leave there, even though there's a minute left. So I'll just throw back your way. I absolutely agree. And so a couple of thoughts. Where are those spaces where those families are successfully being served? Those are natural potential allies and partners to you. Those are places where you can learn about how the reach was established and the service gained. April, go ahead. I see you leaning in.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure you can point to those in communities. I see somebody about Native families. I can only imagine, you're also dealing with confidence and understanding tribal land, tribal culture, but there's a whole university in this state. And I would be glad to do some additional conversation about like pathways that exist, people who serve, that might begin to lend creative thinking about, what is our outreach plan? I would wonder, Becky, who's doing the evaluations? What's being asked? Why aren't the segments of the population that aren't being reached to ask about awareness of, right? So again, there's dollars involved, lots of fun things. Oh, there's an evaluation coming too.
I'll give a couple closing thoughts here just to honor the fact that some people will start to peel off. So we'll go ahead and do this. So Nicole did go ahead and put the evaluation up so that you can do that, and it's a quick, short one. I wanted to say that this is the beginning of a conversation. I think these meetings will not be strictly one-off, self-contained units. They are self-contained in a certain goal, and they are a part of a conversation that's ongoing. And as I sort of said at the beginning, like we really have taken this thread, and I always say it 3 different ways because I don't like any of the ways we say it, but this thread of, digging into equity and how we're doing what we're doing, and how we're creating what we're doing, and how we're engaging and reaching just the full spectrum of the population, right? And that's just really been something we've been digging into, and I think it's bearing fruit. And we won't have all the answers today, but we're growing and changing and learning and transforming what we're doing, which I think is profound. And just one final note to the specific kind of example that came up. And the tribal communities, we had an Act Early State team member a few years ago from the tribal communities, a liaison. And as we were talking about autism, he's a grandfather of a kid with autism, and he pointed out, oh, well, we don't. He thought his community did not view autism as a problem. You wrapped yourselves around that child and supported them as they needed. And I've thought about that a great deal because it gets back to this idea of framing. And how we view something and what we designed to help with this thing as we conceptualized it. And I think we don't need more needs assessments perhaps, but I think we do need a new drawing board and sitting down with different people at the table to say, hey, how do you view this? If we talk about such and such, how are you seeing it? Where are the assets and strengths and joys there? Where are the challenges and pain points and struggles? And then a second point is, you said who's serving people successfully in that community. And another way to kind of ask that is if we're trying to figure out where people go for help with a specific issue is, asking people, what would you do if you wanted help around resources? Who would you go to? Where would you go? And it could be the fact, Becky, that, maybe if we were designing this Children, Youth, Social Healthcare Needs Network, 10, 20 years ago with different people at the table, it just might have been a different system or thing that was designed. So it can be that maybe something's different, needs to be, there's some differences in the design. So anyway, absolutely. Appreciate everybody coming. I feel like this is a good seed for our future. We have other opportunities outside of these meetings to spotlight bright spots. So if you have ideas, just like those lightning rounds of things you want our community to know about, these bright spots that we do outside of these meetings are often from other states or people you want to invite in because they're not at the meetings with us. Please let Nicole know. We are launching a new website for the team and a newsletter. So that will get launched after this meeting. So keep an eye out for that. Any feedback or input on how to make that better. We will break down these recordings into pieces of the lightning rounds and the presentation, and those will start to be posted on the website so you can catch what you missed. And I think that's it. I said that as quick as I could. Thank you very much to Sarah and April. We really appreciate you bringing your insights and your experience to us and sharing with us and learning with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, and the debrief is actually in a different Zoom call, so it should be in the meeting invite, so some of you over there.